As some of you might know, the Nikon S4 is one of my favorite cameras, one of my favorite Nikon rangefinders for sure, and probably one of my favorite cameras overall. And right here, I have two of them. And I'm here kind of discussing them because there's some mysteries about these cameras. There's a lot of things that are assumed or not really understood. So the backstory is that essentially the S4 was created. It was the final Nikon rangefinder that was created, and it was basically a stripped-down budget version of the SP and the S3. It just has a simplified viewfinder, kind of like the S3. It doesn't have any sort of self-timer. It's got this very simplified film counting mechanism that has to be manually reset. Things like that were all kind of budget-saving measures. There's other things. There's no socket for a motor drive, which the S3 and S4 both had, and I think technically some of the Black Dial S2s had them as well, but they don't have that feature, so you can't add a motor drive to them. Not that it's really a big deal since there are not many of them around. But generally it's accepted this camera was made for the Japanese audience as sort of a budget camera, and it's very rare, and it's especially rare outside Japan because they were never really exported from Japan. But I found something that I think is kind of interesting. I have this other SP. Looks pretty much the same. You might notice it has the 50 f1.4 lens because it's a little bit bigger. That came with it, which is a little odd for a budget feature. That was a pretty expensive upgrade at the time. But there's two more things if you look closely. The most blaring is a little EP mark right here at the top. Can I get that in focus? I think that's about right. But you see it has the little EP mark. And for those of you who don't know, that's basically, it means export paid. And that was a marking that was put on cameras that were sold at defense commissaries, which are basically just stores on military bases where service members would go and they could buy this stuff. And they could essentially buy it duty free and take it out of the country without having to pay taxes thanks to that little mark on it. This might have been done at some airport duty-free stores, but it's not very clear. That there's a lot of debate about that. Some people swear it was, some people swear it wasn't. And just because some people might think that's an engraving that was added later, if you look, you'll also notice that the markings on the helicoil are in feet. It goes up to 50 feet, whereas this kind of standard model is in meters. And the lens is a little harder to get off, but it goes up to 20 meters. So there's obviously a couple of differences here. Nothing too significant or amazing, but I think it is kind of interesting because it's generally accepted that these cameras weren't really very popular and weren't really sold outside of Japan. I tried to look it up and I can't really find many references. It seems like the EP cameras are pretty rare to begin with, and this is the only one I've seen for an S4. The only other reference I could find was on the CameraQuest site. If you go into the S4 section, it claims that a few of them were sold as export models at commissaries. And even then, he doesn't give any numbers, but he suspects it was very rare. They only made about 5,900 of these cameras in total. So they're pretty rare to begin with. Not exceptionally rare, but as far as most consumer-grade cameras go, that is pretty rare. And the story behind this camera is, from CameraQuest, I can't really confirm this. There's someone who claims this camera was kind of sort of designed to some extent by David Douglas Duncan, who was a famous photojournalist. He was really big in the Korean War, and he did a series on like Pablo Picasso, the famous artist. And it's said that he kind of collaborated with Nikon to some extent and suggested they build a camera like this that was basically an S3, but it doesn't have the self-timer because photojournalists don't really need it. Slightly simplified viewfinder. I don't know if he suggested the exact 50 and 105 frame lines, but I think he just suggested keep it pretty simple and kind of a weather-sealed body, which this doesn't really have technically. But I guess you could make an argument that getting rid of the little self-timer kind of weather seals it more. But then again, you would think they'd want the covered sort of self-resetting film counter that the SP and the S3 have. But maybe that was a budget-cutting compromise they made. But regardless, I found it kind of interesting that I have these two cameras, and both of them seem to have kind of different backstories and a lot of little features that vary. I don't really know what else to say. I find it interesting. I know most people won't really care. If you have an S4 with an EP marking on it, let me know. Send me a picture maybe. I'd be really interested to see that. And that's pretty much it for now.